Sparks that I don't remember. Hold and let it shine. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away.
Hello, dear friends of Kabala International. We are once again with Mario.
How are you, Nacho? Shalom.
Very good. Shalom. Today we're going to talk about self-deceptions, and I propose an alternative title that could be this: Baina's Traps.
Very good. Yes, you're close to the idea of what it is.
Well, let's develop this topic and see what comes up.
Yes, see. In the subject of self-deception, we find a small matter which is the deception of existing. If we understand that existence and non-existence are in oscillation, we exist in space-time as information that is revealed. We know that we exist because we are in a limited entity, and there is no doubt that this limited entity feels that it exists. But from the cosmogonic point of view, if we analyze it from a more than universal consciousness, rather a cosmogonic consciousness that encompasses everything in the universe, we really are a consciousness, a neuron of divinity. We do not have a totally subjective psychological entity. Rather, we belong to a continuum of energy that manifests. Since we are within that continuum of manifesting energy, of course, existence is what we know to be between birth and death. Anyway, in Kabbalah, we know that instead of physical death, we also continue with a form of existence, even before we are born as well. But that's another subject. I want people to understand that there is a structural problem that leads us to live self-deceptions permanently. It is a much deeper issue than the binar, because it is related to our limits. I believe I hear something, or I believe I don't hear something, and that belief is structural. I hear or I don't hear, I have a physical limitation. Dolphins listen to 100,000 hertz, and humans 8,000. It means that a dolphin listens much more than I do. There are two issues here that we have to analyze. The first is our structural limitations. What I see is what I can see, not what it is. From that point on, we could already say that our senses are completely self-deceiving because our senses are limited. We cannot encompass senses to infinity. Our senses are limited, and therefore all that we can grasp of reality is limited. So there is already a self-deception. What reality am I seeing here? Am I seeing you? Am I seeing those who are filming us? Am I seeing beyond what is happening in the world and the universe? I have no idea what is happening. I can only evaluate reality from this very limited perception that I have. So, the first thing I would tell you is that to be out of all delusion, you would have to be Ein Sof, because in Ein Sof, there is no deception because all the information is there. If one has so little information, so limited. At the structural level, the system of self-deception is very big because I lack a lot of information at the level of the secret, at the level of SOD. So the first thing to do is to sympathize with our imperfection by saying, everything I see is distorted, and everything I feel is distorted because it corresponds and is equivalent to the capacity of my Kali, my vessel, and my limitation. We are facing a very big problem. What is the problem? If everything is limited by structure and distorted by my structure, I am seeing a reality that is deceiving me. Because I'm not seeing reality, I'm seeing what my limitations impose on reality.
It is a representation.
So, but then, be careful here. because we are no longer talking about self-deceptions, we are talking about structural limitations that deceive our senses, and therefore we live deceived by our limitations.
Yes, but I believe that this is also a structural part of Ein Sof. The structural question of perception as we experience it, and the psychic representation that we make of that perception is part of it. I think that the dimension of self-deception probably has more to do with, for example, the system in which we live is based on self-deception.
Totally. But for now, we understand that this system is the best we have to organize ourselves. Therefore, imagine that we make an analysis, and in 100 or 50 years, we decide that the system in which we live has to be corrected or replaced. The new system will generate other self-deceptions because every system is a self-deception. So we are never going to be able to get out of self-deception in terms of organization. Now, we leave aside the structural self-deceptions of the universe and the system that we just talked about. Because of the self-deceptions of the Binah are the ones that hurt us and do not let us grow. So the whole system cheats me. I have two options: to live in pain, self-deceptions, or living happily with my self-deceptions. So when we talk about self-deceptions to the Binah, it is when the soul cannot be honest with itself. And so self-deceptions are mechanisms of dishonesty. So there are two types of self-deception: the structural self-deception to the universe system or to the organizational system at the socio-political level as well, which are juxtaposed, structural limitations of the universe and socio-political limitations of the system. But then, what we call self-deceptions of the Binah are those ideas that the Binah has. That makes my soul unable to develop, that deceives my soul, and do not let my soul be what it is. In short, that the honesty of the soul is corrupted. Self-deception is a system that does not allow me to be honest with myself and creates dishonesty. And it is not social dishonesty in front of the other. No, it is a dishonesty with me. The other person may not even be aware of the dishonesty we are talking about. Regarding self-deception, the clip of the Binah is a form of betrayal of the soul. That is the self-deception of the Binah. The self-deception of the Binah is, I live a life that I don't want to live, but I live it because my husband has money and finances me. So I don't love him, but he finances me. Now the day my husband became penniless, he is no longer of any use to me because I wanted him to finance me, so my husband or my wife. I can change it. There are many people who are self-deceived, and that causes his soul to suffer. So what happens in that situation? What happens to the soul of someone who suffers from self-deception? For example, in this example I give you, in the example of a woman or a man who has a sentimental relationship with an economic interest, in self-deception they stay there in that system. But when the soul wants to be honest, suddenly it commits an infidelity, which is not an infidelity, it is faithful to the soul. There are many infidelities that are faithful to the soul. We must be very careful with the prejudice of infidelity, because in an infidelity, many people are being faithful to their soul, therefore they are not unfaithful. So, we are entering a mental system where the mind has sometimes quite perverse resources at the service of repressing the soul, such as dissociation. There are very dissociated people who live two lives in parallel. They give to the soul what they can, and on the other hand, they give to the mind what they can give. But what the mind gives is not what the soul gives, and the soul keeps asking. Suddenly, if the levels of self-deception remain very high at the mental level, and the soul cannot be honest with itself, it can end up making the person sick. Because the soul can say, look, I get sick because this mind is not understanding the honesty of what I am. The problem of the self-deceptions that we are talking about are self-deceptions that condition me by a series of objectives that my mind has, that do not correspond to the desire and nature of the soul. That is what this subject of self-deception is all about. Mental self-deception is designed to fulfill objectives of the mind that are in opposition with the inner feeling of the soul.
Listening to you, the famous allegory of the chariot with the horses came to mind. The mind driving the reins, the horses, the desire, the impulse, and the soul is guiding the driver of that cart. In self-deception, it may be that the mind is not only the one that tries to control the course, but also the impulses do it. The impulse can be a form of self-deception.
No, let's see. When we talk about impulses, we have to be careful because Freud associated them with biological instincts. When we are talking about the soul, we are not talking about biological instincts.
No, that's why I tell you.
We are talking about all those inner feelings. I think the concept would be closer to Maslow with self-actualization. The soul came into this world to be what it is. It came to be, for example, to be an artist, but the father, who is a notary, puts it in the notary's office. So this person can be an excellent notary, but he is desperate because his soul is telling him all day long, I want to be an artist. This man can maybe go to an art course, but as time goes by, he puts up with the notary's office less and less. He only wants to do his art. So what does the mind tell him? Look, Daddy is going to leave you all the clients of the notary's office. The guy stays there and continues signing as a notary, and then suddenly he says, but what is my soul asking me? The soul wants to go out. The soul says to the partner, I want to be a painter. And the partner says, but how are we going to make a living? You have to stay in the notary's office. Not only does he feel repressed on an intellectual level with the clients, but also within the family and the material reality. So between the material reality, the advice of one, the advice of the other, the clients he is going to inherit, the guy says, you know what, I'm staying in the notary's office. Then frustrated souls appear. Frustrated souls appear who are not brave. And in life you have to be brave. In life, you have to recognize what the soul wants and go to the end. And then when you recognize what the soul wants, self-deceptions disappear. What happens is that when self-deceptions disappear, the notary disappears and the partner disappears. Sometimes everything disappears, but it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that the person brings out his potential. When he brings out his potency, then come the results.
Well, all disappears to continue.
The person does not realize that in this mental system of repression of the soul, he will become ill, because it is a sick system. You are making yourself sick. He is making himself sick. And from a spiritual point of view, what we can't tell people is that they are self-deceptive to make themselves sick. With the centuries that we have of sages of the people of Israel, the last thing they did was self-deception, which may be one of the fundamental factors of anti-Semitism. The Jew is always telling the truth about the situation. This one I want to get out of the system. The Nazis said they wanted to finish with the Jews in Europe because they wanted to finish with the conscience, because all they want is for people to wake up, and the system doesn't want people to wake up. The system wants people to be asleep. Therefore, the political systems want the people to sleep to stay in the system. Spirituality wants people awake. Now, how do people start to wake up? People don't wake up with a revolution against someone. The best revolution is the inner evolution of the soul being honest with itself. When the soul became honest with itself, it changed the person's life. It is a before and an after. In general, it happens between 35 and 45, especially around the 40s, this break happens. Up to the age of 40, the person goes in the inertia of what the culture told him, what the parents told him. He goes in an inertia that does not know where he is going, but between 40 and 45, the middle of life, the break, the transformation, the mem of the 40s appears, and he says, you know what? Up to this point, I have done everything my parents wanted, what my grandfather wanted. I went to see the bulls like my great-grandfather, and I have already fulfilled the whole family constellation. Now I am going to fulfill my soul. When that moment comes, it is like the cry of independence of the soul, as if to say, now I am honest. Beware that moment because it is hard, not for the soul, but for those around it. Because they always gave you coffee and you like tea, and now you say I want tea, but you always like coffee, now I want tea. The person next to you says, I will continue giving you coffee, and you say, but I want tea. All the little details change because now the soul, when it goes out for all. The moment the soul leaves, it is over. There is no one around, the soul goes to martyrdom. When the soul goes out to do what is honest, no one should stand in its way, because it will go on the contrary. If someone gets in the way, it is strengthened. I want to do this.
Well, another day we can talk about that process of discovery. What is the true intentionality of the soul and how to discover it?
That's right, we'll see.
Well, Mario, thank you. Shalom.